Today I present the first installment on a Monster Ecology series with Hobgoblins. Now, Monster Ecology is quintessential in the understanding of your monster. You understand where it comes from and how it fits into the world you have it. You will begin to understand how to truly and effectively get it over in the game, how to roleplay it when the monsters are vastly more than a simple collection of numbers, of hit points, of armor class, of damage, running at the party to simply die. When they are more than that, when they have that capacity for role-playing, when they have something in their mind, in their mentality, that predicates why they are attacking, how they attack, the tactics that they use, how effectively they fight, when the morale breaks. If all of this is understood by you before you begin to use the monsters, they will come across as far more fluid and real to your players. And then when you begin to add in the vivid combat descriptions or the intricate social role-playing, if the party are able to bring it to another level, you're going to get a vast amount of interest out of your players. Ooh, that's actually something that's real in the context of the game. It's not just something to slaughter and have its goods plundered, as is the custom of adventuring parties. Now, Hobgoblins simply began in the original Dungeons & Dragons game as something to be slaughtered and something to have its goods plundered by the party. Now, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons did a little better than this, simply presenting them as the lawful evil option. Well, lawful evil in itself entails a great deal when you roll lawful evil together with something that is just as intelligent as a human, a dwarf, a gnome, a halfling, an elf. Hobgoblins are just as intelligent, just as wise as these races, and in some cases more charismatic. They have penalties to none of these scores. Now, that is very important because we see that is the overall of their society. Hobgoblins are also bigger than all of these races. They average at 6.5 feet tall. They're large and strong, and they are just as nimble, quick, and agile as an elf. They bonus out with the same dexterity score as an elf. They are just as sturdy, vigorous, and hardy as a dwarf. They bonus out the same constitution as a dwarf does. Now, another important thing to think about with hobgoblins is they reach, being goblinoids, they reach sexual maturity faster than any of the basic player character types I've just described there. They also reproduce faster. Now, in the 3.5 Monster Manual, it talks about hobgoblins essentially being like any other creatures. It begins to describe them as being a bit better. They keep their weapons shined and clean, polished. They understand tactics and the value of how to implement them. But then they just slide right into. They live in forests and dungeons and caves. No, they don't. They wouldn't. That makes absolutely no sense. There would be more of them than there are of anything else in the campaign world. When I created a campaign world, the leading horror in that world were hobgoblins. Hobgoblins controlled the largest city in the world. I created them with nobility, with ruling clans and families and houses, with social intrigue and politics that were vastly beyond anything that anyone else in the world had, because they are lawful evil. That is the get it done alignment. They take slaves, they push, they pursue, they conquer. They are tyranny. When you combine that with someone who has no problem dying, an understanding of how to use weapons and how to clean your weapons, creatures that are naturally very stealthy and very aggressive and have no problem working with foul, stupid monsters and reining them in under their tyranny, working and bringing in the numbers of goblins and orcs and trolls and ogres under their iron fist. And perhaps even that is a bit of a misnomer. The way that I constructed them in my world was the children of steel, forged in the eternal flames of Morgul, the thousand-faced god. And the hobgoblins all the races of the world were associated with something. Humans with clay, gnolls with grass, but hobgoblins were the children of steel, made and created from the steel itself. Now, the way I used hobgoblins, being as nimble as elves, who are renowned weapon makers for their skillful fingers, and being as sturdy as dwarves, who are renowned weapon and armor makers for their ability to tirelessly swing a hammer with simple purpose and lawful determination, I decided that hobgoblins should be the predominant weapon makers in the world, having an affinity towards steel and making swords and armor that was superior to that made of anyone else, including dwarves or elves. Now, that's something I think that should really be thought about, the way that hobgoblins are presented, because they can be an entire empire. There's no reason that they should be living in forests or caverns. They should build massive cities. They are more lawful than humans. They spread faster than humans, and typically in your fantasy game settings, the reason that humans have overtaken elves and dwarves is because elves and dwarves procreate very, very slowly. They take forever to reach sexual maturity, particularly elves. Hobgoblins don't. They reach sexual maturity very early, earlier than humans. They breed faster than humans. This is exactly the reason why humans are given the edge in the descriptions by your fantasy game makers over and over again. Hobgoblins are more aggressive, more vicious, more lawful. They procreate faster. They are more warlike. They're more territorial. They easily work together in those systems that lawful evil creatures can. They have no problem doing whatever it takes to get it done, including destroying, as is the custom of evil creatures, and enslaving, as is definitely the aim of lawful evil entities. I really dislike the idea of hobgoblins just laying down and jobbing to second, third level parties as they run out and ambush them on the road, as they live back in some filthy squalor. Hobgoblins are not orcs. Orcs are quite fine to be employed and used in those fashions, because that's what orcs do. They are stupid, they're ugly, they're primitive. There is absolutely no reason that hobgoblins should be any of these things. They should be martial masters, able to strike utter fear and horror into players. Players in my game do not mess with hobgoblins. The last 4 campaigns I've run, 0 hobgoblins have died. When the players have come in contact with hobgoblins, there's been almost an awe. Like, that's the thing you don't want to mess with. Their skill is superb. I've taken bits of Greco-Roman culture and bits of Persian culture and woven it into the hobgoblins. They are very religious, is the way that they serve their god, and really putting their god over. The players are like, this god is one that I definitely need to consider, and the players will go and try to get those hobgoblins to make weapons for them, or they'll try to they'll really sell for them, because they've heard about that. I like to have hobgoblins that are created with ranks of polearms. I am a big fan of polearms, one of the most misused weapons in the game, unfortunately, and so often just abandoned. A legion of hobgoblins in full armor marching towards you with all pikes raised high is a horrifying thing to see. Wave after wave after wave after wave of them coming over the hills towards you, with bowmen, with crossbowmen, with other implements of death and war. And this is a way which you can bring hobgoblins in. You can have them to be artisans of steel, creators of crafts, enslavers of pathetic evil creatures like kobolds and goblins and orcs, like gnolls and bugbears. And I say they're pathetic because they are pathetic compared to the hobgoblins, who would run complete roughshod over these creatures and assemble them as their slave armies and begin to march on everything that you created and hold dear in your world, for underestimating them and placing them into the caves and forest. Something to really think about. The role, the ecology that you place hobgoblins in. I'm going to discuss other monsters in the future, but I really want you to think about them. Can you get more mileage? Can you get more value? Can you make your players scared of hobgoblins? And is there any role or interest filled by them simply being something for second, third, fourth level party characters to have job to them? You have orcs for that. Orcs fit perfectly fine into the exact role. Is what's presented in the Dungeon and Dragon book, does it make any sense in regarding to hobgoblins? Why would someone who's as intelligent, as wise, as charismatic, and more physically able in every way than a human, who reproduces faster than a human, who becomes sexually mature quicker than a human, who is more aggressive than a human, who is more lawful than a human, who is more evil than a human, why would they live in squalor, in forest, in dungeons, and why would they sit there and simply wait for you to come in and kill a few of them? Lawful creatures are organized. They would create cities, they would create nations and empires, and everyone else in the world would fear the children of steel.